Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this tutorial on Spark SQL. We will learn about what is Spark SQL, what are Spark SQL features, its architecture, Spark SQL Data Frame API, Data Source API, Spark SQL's Catalyst Optimizer, running SQL queries, and then we can have a quick demo on Spark SQL. So, what is Spark SQL? It's a Sparks model or Apache Sparks module for structured data processing. Now, it allows you to work with structured, semi-structured, and even unstructured data, but primarily with structured and semi-structured. It originated to overcome the limitations of Apache Hive. Now we know that Apache Hive is a data warehouse package on top of Hadoop, and this basically is quite extensible. It allows you to work on structured data or data which can be structurized with the various features such as user-defined functions or support of complex data types or custom MapReduce scripts and many more. However, there are a lot of limitations in terms of using Apache Hive, such as it always depends on MapReduce as an execution engine or processing framework, or it could also use Thais. You would not be able to do insert, update, deletes when it comes to Apache Hive. It is more of a batch oriented operation, and basically querying with Hive can be time consuming. However, Hive is quite extensible in the way it supports data warehousing use cases. It lags in performance. As I said, it goes for MapReduce and is not really suitable when you would want to do faster querying or ad hoc querying. It does not allow you to resume a job if it fails somewhere in the middle. And these are some high-level limitations of Hive. When we talk about Spark, it performs better than Hive. Now, Spark, we already know, is a in-memory computing framework, which basically works on having the data loaded into the memory, that is in the form of RDDs, and then having the DAG execution whenever a action is invoked. Now, if we compare latency in terms of hours, we would see Spark is quite competitive in that with Hive and is a better performant. When you talk about CPU in days or CPU reservation time, in all of these cases, Spark wins over Hive. Now let's look at Spark SQL features and let's understand how it helps. So as I mentioned, Spark SQL is a module for structured data processing primarily. Now, unlike the basic Spark's RDD API, the interfaces provided by Spark SQL provide Spark with more information about the structure of both the data and computation being performed. Now we know that Spark has a DAG scheduler behind the scenes, and if that DAG scheduler could know what are the steps which are part of your processing application, then it would understand the steps, it would benefit from data which would be structured and thus have a better way of processing your data. Internally, Spark SQL uses this extra information to perform extra optimizations. Now, there are different ways in which you can interact with Spark SQL, including SQL and Dataset API. You could be using Data Frames API, Data Source API, and also the older way, that is RDD API. Now, some of these features really make Spark SQL a compelling framework for data processing and analyzing, especially if you have data which is structured. You can integrate Spark SQL and query structured data inside Spark programs. It is highly compatible with SQL-based frameworks like Hive, so it can work on the data which is stored in Hive. It can work on the data which is stored in your RDBMSs, which are external to your big data setup, or even on the files which are stored on your distributed file system such as SDFS. When we talk Spark's integration with Hive, you can run unmodified Hive queries on existing warehouses in Spark SQL. So while existing Hive data queries and UDFs, Spark SQL offers full compatibility. Now, Spark SQL leverages the RDD model as it supports large jobs and mid-query fault tolerance. For interactive and long queries, it uses the same engine. So in terms of Spark 1.6 and older versions, we had RDD API. That is, whenever you do some transformations such as map, flat map, filter, and many more that would create RDDs, and you can say logical steps in the DAG, which would be executed only and only when an action was invoked. Now, in terms of older APIs, we said that Spark has RDD, and when we talk about newer versions of Spark, we have Spark data frames or data sets. And when we talk about data frames, that is using an implementation of RDD, which we call as schema RDDs. Or you could say in older versions of Spark, we were talking about schema RDDs, which get created based on your transformations. And in newer versions, the same schema RDDs are called data frames. There are different ways in which you can use Spark SQL. So you could use an ODBC or JDBC connector, and then you could be connecting to your external databases, business intelligence tools, and then extract the data from your underlying data stores and process them. Remember, Spark does not have its own storage. It has various components such as Spark SQL, streaming, MLlib, you have RDDs, and you have graphics. But then Spark always relies on a storage. Now that storage could be a Hadoop distributed file system, that could be a NoSQL database. It could also be a RDBMS to which you can connect using JDBC or ODBC, or it could be just your local file system on which your files are stored, and Spark can use those files and process the data within those files. Now, when we talk about your Spark architecture or Spark SQL architecture, you have basically at the lowest level, you have your data sources. Now that could be your data in CSV format or JSON format, or also coming in from external sources using your JDBC ODBC connectors. You have different APIs. So you have a data source API, we'll learn about it. You have a data frame and a data set API, which allows you to work with data. And then you have different ways in using these. So you could have a data frame domain specific language, that is DSL, or you could be using Spark SQL or Hive querying language to use one of these APIs to process your data. So Spark SQL is Apache Spark's module mainly to work with structured data. Now, when we talk about Spark SQL, it has three main layers. It has a language API. So Spark is very compatible as it supports multiple languages such as Python, your Scala, Java, even R, which is used in data science activities, and your Hive querying language. When we talk about schema RDD, so Spark SQL works on schema, tables, and records. And what it creates behind the scenes is a schema RDD or an RDD which has schema within it, which helps the DAG scheduler to understand the data and the steps which are being performed. And as I said, in newer versions, your schema RDD is your data frame, which is nothing but a representation of your data in the form of rows and columns with column headings, and you could call it as a temporary table where your data is getting stored. The third layer is your data sources. So that is your data coming in from varied sources. That could be your files in different formats such as CSV, JSON, text, Parquet, Avro, and so on. You could be getting your data from different NoSQL databases such as Cassandra, MongoDB, your HBase, or anything else. You could also be getting data directly from Hive, which are your logical structures such as databases and tables. However, the data is stored on an underlying file system such as SDFS. Now, when we talk about your data frames and data sets, so a data frame is basically a data set organized into named columns. So what is a data set? So a data set is a distributed collection of data. It's a new interface which was added in Spark 1.6, which provides the benefits of RDDs such as strong typing, ability to use powerful Lambda functions, and with the benefits of Spark SQL's optimized execution engine. So a data set can be constructed from JVM objects and then manipulated using functional transformations such as map, flat map, filter, and so on. So your dataset API is available in Scala and Java. And Python did not support the dataset API, but I think that's being worked upon for the future releases. When we talk about data frame, it is basically a data set organized into named columns, or we can say representing your structured data or semi-structured data in the form of rows and columns, with columns having headings. So it is conceptually equivalent to a table in a relational database or a data frame in Python or R programming language, but it has richer optimizations under the hood. So data frames can be constructed from wide array of your sources, such as your structured data files, tables in Hive, external databases, or even existing RDDs. So again, your data frame API is available in Scala, Java, Python, and R programming, and your data frame is represented by a data set of rows. We can just say data frame is a simply alias of your data set of rows. Now, when we talk about your data frames, let's also understand about your Spark SQL data source API. Spark SQL, it supports operating on a variety of data sources through the data frame interface. It supports your different formats such as CSV, Hive, Avro, JSON, Parquet, text, and so on. As we know about in Spark, it is lazily evaluated like your Apache Spark transformations and can be accessed through SQL context and Hive context. So as we have seen in previous tutorials, your Spark context or your Hive context, or in later versions what we have is Spark session, these are basically the classes which are your entry point of your application. So when you start a Spark shell in an interactive way or a PySpark, you would see the Spark context is initialized, or your Spark session is automatically initialized. If you're building your applications using an IDE, then we would have to define and initialize our Spark context and Spark session, which is in later versions of Spark. In older versions, you had Spark context and then you had SQL context or Hive context. It can be Spark can be easily integrated with big data tools and frameworks via Spark Core Engine. Now, what we can do here is I can go into my command line, I can go into my Spark directory, and then I can go in bin here. If I just do a dir/p, I would see that within this I have different binaries or different programs, and what we can do is we can just start by doing a ./Spark shell. So this is basically an interactive way of working with Spark. For people who would be more comfortable with Scala as a programming language, they could use Spark shell. Or if people are comfortable with Python, then they could be using PySpark. So here I'm trying to launch the Spark shell, which will run in a local mode. It will not be contacting any yarn or resource manager. However, it will just start an application locally on this machine. It will initiate the Spark context, as I mentioned earlier, or basically your Spark session, depending on which version of Spark we are working on. So if you see here, I have Spark version 2.4.3, Scala is 2.11. It has a Spark context which is available as SC, and Spark session which is available as Spark. So this basically allows me to work either with RDD API using SC, or I could be creating a data frame using Spark. So both of these classes have got initialized and they will act as an entry point of my application into the cluster. In older versions of Spark, which is 1.6, we still had Spark context available. But then if we wanted to work on Spark SQL, which was launched in an experimental way with Spark 1.6, we could be using, instead of Spark session, we could be using SQL context or Hive context. So this is the Spark context or Spark session which is getting initialized. If I was building an application using IDE, then I would have to, depending on my use case and need, I will have to initialize Spark context or Spark session within my IDE. Coming back and understanding about your Catalyst Optimizer. So when we talk about Catalyst Optimizer, what is it? And what does it do? Spark, your Catalyst Optimizer, leverages advanced programming language features such as Scala's pattern matching and Casi quotes in a novel way to build an extensible query optimizer. So what it does, it works in 4 phases. Your Catalyst Optimizer, it analyzes a logical plan to resolve the references when you are querying the data. It has a logical plan optimization internally, which will come up with the best way to get to the data. It has a physical planning layer, and then it also does code generation to compile parts of query to your Java bytecodes. When we talk about your Catalyst Optimizer, we can say if you have a SQL query, now that SQL query would result in an unresolved logical plan, which can then help in analyzing the logical plan, and it also depends on the reference to internal catalog, which has information about your data which you are trying to query. Then there is a logical plan based on the analysis, and a logical optimized plan which is post your local logical optimization, which then relates in physical plans, and a cost model which helps the Catalyst Optimizer know what is the best way to reach and access the data. It gives away a selected physical plan which will then generate code based on the RDDs which would be implemented based on your query. Now that's how Catalyst Optimizer works. When we talk about SQL context or Spark session, as I explained, it is a class used for initializing the functionalities of Spark SQL. So in older versions of Spark, such as Spark 1.6, when you would start your Spark shell or when you would start your PySpark. So we can see that here. Now I could just do a simple quit, and I could then try bringing up PySpark, which is also a binary or a program to work with your Spark, but then that brings up your Python's shell, and useful for people who are well versed with Python as a programming language. Now if you see here, we again have Spark context initialized as SC, and then we have Spark session available as Spark. If I was working in older version, I would not have Spark session, but I would have SQL context, which could be used to use the functionality of Spark SQL, or basically using Spark to work with structured data. So your SQL context is a class which is used for initializing the functionalities of your Spark SQL, or you can say it is the class which becomes an entry point of your application for the resources which your application would need for processing. So we could just start a Spark shell, and basically that would start your Spark context or Spark. So when we talk about this Spark context or Spark session, you can also create a SQL context or a Spark session using something like this on an interactive cell. So you can say val SQL context equals new org Apache SQL context SC, and you could then start building your application. I will show that how you do that in your IDE, wherein you have to initialize your Spark context. However, as I said, in Spark shell or in PySpark, your Spark context gets initialized automatically, and you can work with your RDD API, or you could be using Spark session, which is available as Spark, to work on Spark SQL, whether you're working with PySpark or you're working with Spark SQL using your Spark shell. Now moving forward, when we talk about Spark session, so this is an entry point to any functionality in Spark. So to create a basic Spark session, you could be using a Spark session.builder if you're working in an IDE like Eclipse. So here you have to import a package that is org Apache Spark SQL Spark session, and then you could create a variable such as val Spark. You could use Spark session.builder. You could provide an app name. You could also provide config properties, that is your configuration properties, and then you could say get or create. Now that creates Spark, which can then be used to work with your Spark SQL. You could then do import Spark implicits and continue to work. Now here, let me start my Eclipse parallelly, and I can show you how it looks here. Now, when we talk about working with data frames, either we can be doing that using your Spark shell, PySpark, or we could be using our Eclipse. So let's see how we can work with data frames here. So let me just quit PySpark and let me get into Spark shell. So I could just do this, and this will start my Spark shell. That's an interactive way of working with my files. I could be using Spark here, and I could be using Spark session. Now for this, we would need some files. Now I could be working on Windows or I could be working on my Linux machines. So here I can show you both. Now this is basically a Spark standalone setup where I have set up things. You can refer to the previous tutorials where I have shown how you can set up Spark standalone or Spark on your Windows. I've started my Spark standalone cluster. If I look at the processes on these two machines, that would show me that I have a master and two worker processes. I can also open up the Spark UI if we would want to look into our applications. And here we can just say http://um1 and then 8080. So that shows me my Spark standalone cluster, which had two worker nodes. As of now, there are no applications which are started, and we can start Spark Shell here. So I can go into user local Spark, and then I can see that I have basically a bin folder which has my programs or binaries which we can use. Now we could be using that from anywhere because in my bash RC I have set up my Spark path, so that will allow me to give my Spark commands from anywhere. And here we can also see that I have some data in sample files. We can pick up one of the files here which we can then use to create a data frame. So I can just say Spark shell from my home directory where I will target a JSON file which is already here to create a data frame. Now once I'm starting my Spark shell, it basically shows that it has started an application. It shows a UI which is available. It is basically interacting with my Spark master. There is Spark context available as a SC and Spark session which is available as Spark. Same thing we see in our Windows machine. That is, you have Spark context, a web UI available which I can launch. I can look at Spark context available and Spark session which is available. Now taking this file, what we can do is we can say val x, and then I can say Spark, which is the short form of Spark session. And then if you are not sure what method should be used, you can just do a tab and that will show you all the possible options which are available within Spark. So here we can use read and again do a dot and then do a tab, and it shows me that we can get our data in different formats. Now by default, if you do not mention a format, then it will expect the file which you are working on in a Parquet format. We can use a load method here, or I can just say spark.read.json and then I'll point it to a file which is in my sample files folder, and I will point it to people.json and I can hit on enter. Now here, since we are using Spark session, we will see if it creates a data frame. Now if you see here, it is pointing to a driver issue, basically saying it is not able to reach MySQL or the Metastore. So by default, Spark also expects if it can connect to your Metastore which is being used by Hive. So now I'm on my right machine, UM1, where I have my MySQL installed, which I just checked by testing, and I have my MySQL installed here, which is being pointed within the Spark conf by hive-site file. So now I will start my Spark shell again here, which should bring up your Spark context and also your Spark session. It will basically interact with Spark master, which is running on this machine, and as we have given in the conf and in your Spark default conf. So once my Spark shell has started, I can start doing this. I can say val x spark.read.json and then I'll point it to a file which is in this directory called people.json. So that's the file and it is in sample files directory. Now once we do this, we are using Spark session which is available as Spark, and when I do this, it refers to the config files and then it is able to internally discover the Hive's Metastore, which is in a MySQL database. That's because of the way I have set up my Spark standalone cluster, also so that it can work with Hive. Now here we see that a data frame has got created and we can always look into this. So I can just do a x.show to see what is in my data frame. So we pointed to a JSON file and my Spark session allowed me to create a data frame. Now at any point of time, unless and until you use a show or an action, you will not see the result. it would just create a data frame. Now here we have x.show, which shows my data frame. I can also do a x.print schema, and then I can see what is the schema assigned to this. So in this way, we just easily created a data frame using a JSON file. Now if I come here and if I do a refresh, that will show me the application which is running, which has been started by Spark Shell. I can click on this and then I can go into application detail UI to see what we have done. So I did a spark.read.json, and I can look at the DAG here, which shows what happened, what code was generated, what were the transformations which were done. It shows me how many tasks were run for this. And then I can go and look back at my second job, which is basically ending with show, where I see this in a different stage. I see the code which was generated. I see the map partitions and then the map transformation. Also, we can always look at the SQL tab, which is getting created when you use Spark SQL. And within that, we can see what kind of queries were run, how much time did they take, and you can always click on the query to see what internally it did. So it's had a scan JSON, number of output rows, number of files, what was the metadata time, and basically I'm seeing the result. So this is how I create a simple data frame from a file. And as I mentioned, you can read any file format. However, if you do not give a format or if you do not specify the right method, then it will expect the file to be in Parquet format. So we just created a simple data frame from a file. Now we can do many other operations. We can do filtering, we can do selection. So we can do this. I can just do a x.select and I can choose one or multiple fields. So either you could use a dollar and then mention your column name here, something like this. And then I could say I would want to look at the name, I would want to look at the age. But remember, if I just do this, it will just create a data frame. So if I would want to see the result, I will be doing a dot show, and that shows me what I have. I can always do some more things here. I can do a filter and I can say I would want to see the age which is more than say 20. And at any point of time, when you do these transformations, it always creates a data frame or a data set. Now here I see that when I did a filter, it created a data set. So it is using the data set API. Now I can just do a show to see the result, and that will show me the result in the form of rows and columns with column headings. I could do a select, I could do a filter, and I could work on my data in this way on a particular data frame. Now, you could also do some computations if you are interested in. So you could always do a x.select, and then you could be selecting a particular field. For example, I would say age, and I would say I would want to increase its value by 1, and I would like to do a show. So we are working on a data frame wherein it shows me the column name and then it shows me the values. So these are some simple data frame operations which we are doing based on a file which we have here. Now I could be picking up a bigger file and doing more functions or more transformations on that. I could be doing a filter, as I said, a select. I could be running my SQL queries by creating a temporary view out of it. Now here we could pick up a different file. I would say val my data, and then I could say spark.read, and this time I'm going to use the format method here. So I'll say format. Now I would specify I would like to work on CSV file. Then I could basically also use something called as option, and then I could be specifying I would want to infer the schema from the file. So I'll say true. I will say option, and then I could also say a delimiter if you would want to specify. Now here I have infer schema as true, and we would then want header, that is first row in the file, to be considered as the header or the column headings. Then I can just say load, and I would want to load my file. So I'm going to pick up sample files, and then I will point it to a file which I think is existing in this directory, something like this. And then I do this, which should basically create a data frame from a CSV file. You see, it shows 15 fields and the schema is understood. So I can just say my data dot print schema, and this will show me the schema which was inferred, and we have our data frame created. We can always do a my data dot show, and that shows me some rows and columns. Now remember, it will always show you only 20 rows. If you would want more, then you could be giving it here in the bracket, and then you could see more values. So here we have created a data frame from a CSV file. We could do a filter, we could do a select from this, we could basically do any kind of computations. I could give different conditions. So this is a bank related data where some kind of campaign was done to find out if customers would be interested in subscribing for a deposit. Now all these sample files are existing in my GitHub link, and I'll share that link towards the end of session. You can always use these files, or you can use some of your own files. Now here I could just do a my data dot select, and I could be selecting multiple columns if I'm interested in. So I could just do a dollar. I could say I would be interested in age. I could be interested in job, marital status, or even the column which says about subscription, the last one which says why. So I could say dollar, and then I could say job. I would say I would want to see the subscription, and then I could be doing this, close the bracket. Now remember, that will just create a data frame. So we need to do a show to show me the results. So I'm doing a select, and I've started working on my data frame. You could be doing some other kind of calculations. Say we want to find out what are the total number of rows in this particular data frame. So I could just do a count, and then I could do show, or what I could do is I could convert this to a double value by doing this, and it shows me the total count of entries in this data frame is 45,211. Now I could basically be assigning this to a variable, say val total count, and then I get my value. So for example, we would want to find out what is the success rate of this campaign and how many people were really interested in subscribing for a deposit with bank. I could do that by just saying creating a variable called subscription count, and what I would want is I would want to work on my data frame. I would want to basically filter the values where the value for subscription holds true if it is yes, and then we could just do a count of this and convert this to double value like we did earlier for total count, and that tells me how many people were interested in subscription. So it gives me a count of people who were interested in subscribing for a deposit. Now we could do some computation on this. So we could say val success rate, and then I could just say subscription count divided by total count, and you could even multiply this by 100 to see the percentage. So it tells me the success rate of this campaign was 11% because this or these many number of people were interested in subscribing for a deposit. And in this way, you could be doing many more computations. You could be using different functions. You could be using different combination of functions. So for example, I could just do a my data dot select, and then I could say I would want the average on the balance column to find out what is the average balance of the customers which we would want to understand. Now here I could just do a show, and that could show me what is the average balance of a customer who was inquired about his or her interest in a deposit. In similar way, you could be using multiple functions like average, mean, median, percentile, and so on. Now there is one more thing about data frames. You could basically be creating a temporary view, and then people could be using their select queries to work on data. So we could do the same thing. Now here we could say my data dot create or replace temp view, and we could give it a name. So let's say bank data, and this basically facilitates querying. So now we can just use Spark.sql and then start using our queries to query structured data, which we would have basically used to create a data frame. So now I can do a select star from bank data where age is greater than might be 75. And I could just close this, and whenever I do this, remember, it creates a data frame. So if you would want to see the result, you can just do a show, and that will show you the result of your data frame. And we are seeing the fields which are having values greater than 80 or 75. So I not only created a temporary view, but now I'm able to query that using spark.sql. Now here, this is one way in which you can work with your data frames, work on different formats, look into the schema, run your queries, do some computations, and then basically also save it as a data frame. We could do many more things. So here, for example, if I would want to write this data in a different format or save it, I can always do a spark.sql. Now the same query which we ran here, we could put this in a variable. So for example, let's say val result, and I can just do this. Now I know that creates a data frame which has been now assigned to result, and now with result I can basically look into different methods which are available. So if you would want to save it, if you would want to write it in a particular format, remember, if you do not specify a format, then it will always be read or written in Parquet. So I can always do a write dot, either I could be using a particular format, or I could straight away say save, and then I could say, for example, my new df data frame. And if I do this, the whole point is your data frame would now be saved on your machine in this particular directory in a Parquet format. So I can come in here, and then I can look in if I have the directory created. So we see here, and we can look in this, what does this have? And this basically has a Parquet file which got created. Now I can always do a SSH to my second machine, because this is a standalone cluster, and then I can see if there was any directory created on this machine which has the data. If no, then that's fine. If we have a data directory, we can always look for our file. So we just saved the output of our data frame in a Parquet file, and that's my Parquet file. Now there is an easier way of checking if this was fine. So this is in my new df directory. Now what I can do here is I can just say spark.read, and this time I will not specify a format. And we know when we do not do that, it expects the file to be in a Parquet format. So I'll say load my new df, that's the directory. I'll give the file name, and then basically I'll see if it reads this Parquet file, creates a data frame, and yes, it has done that. We can always do a show, and we can see our new data frame. Now I know you might see some error like this, and that is because this file did not exist on both the machines. And when you're looking in a Spark standalone cluster, if you are trying to do a read operation, it basically expects the file to be existing on both the machines, or you should have been getting the file from a distributed file system. Now we can try this again, and I can just do a SCP. I can take this directory, and I know there is a SSH access which I have set up across machines. So I can say SDU at UM2 in the home directory, so that this directory and file exists on both the machines. And now we will try it again. So if you see, now I'm trying to read the file. I don't get any error message. So we worked on a CSV file. We created a data frame. Then we saved the data frame using write.save. And by default, it was stored in a Parquet format. We could test that by just doing a read.load. Now, the way we did a write.save and we did not give a format, we could have chosen a format. So we could have said format, and we could have said JSON, and then do a save and basically give a directory name. Now this is also saving my data frame, but now it is saving it in a format of my choice. So I can look in new df1. I should have my data coming in here. It might take some time, and then we can come back and check here if it has saved my file in a JSON format. So in this way, you can either store the data in a default format, or basically you can store it in a particular format of your choice, such as JSON or text or some other format. So this is how we are just interacting with a file on local file system. I'm creating a data frame out of it, and then basically I'm doing some computations. Now, as I said, if you have a setup, now in this case, I have a Spark standalone cluster, but if I would want, I can start up a Hadoop cluster. I can just say sbin start dfs.sh. Now that will start my Hadoop related processes based on the setup I have. And why am I doing it? Because I would want to try Spark interacting with Hive. Now Hive is using HDFS as the storage layer. So I'm starting my Hadoop cluster. I can go into my second machine, and then basically I can again start my rest of processes. So I can just say sbin, and then I can say start yarn.sh, and that will start my yarn related processes. So I have a Hadoop cluster running, which basically means now I can also work with Hive. So I can just go into Hive directory. I've already set up Hive. I can get into Hive by just doing a bin/Hive. I can look into a database if it is existing. I can look into a table which is existing, see if that contains data, and try querying it using your Spark. So I can say show databases, and that basically shows me that I have a database called testdb. Let's use that in Hive. And now I'm in the database. I can say show tables. That shows me some tables. Let's select one of the table. I can say test TBL2. Might be we can just do a limit of 10 rows and see if it works fine. So that does not have any data. Let's look into another table and let's see if that has some data. That also does not have any data, and that might be if we are not looking into the right metadata. Let's look into one more and see if that's fine. So we will say test TBL limit 10 doesn't have the data. So let's do one thing. Let's create a table. So I'll say create table new TBL. I will say ID is integer, name is string. I will say the table is created. You can always do a listing from here by looking in user Hive warehouse my test database, and then I can see if that my database has the table directory. It has new table. Let's look into that new TBL. And then does that have any data? As of now, no. So I can say load data local in path. I will take this sample files. I know there is a file called kv1.txt which has internal format, and I will say overwrite into table, and then I can say new TBL. So I'm loading some data. It does not like because it does not find this directory. So let's give the right path. So we will say home hdu sample files. Now I'm loading some data. I've done that, and now I can say new tbl limit 10. So this is a simple example of loading some data in Hive table, which has two columns. We did not give any delimiters because I know the file also does not have any specific delimiters. Now here I can just exit this. Our main task was not to work with Hive, but to work with Spark SQL in interacting with Hive, which is a data warehouse package on top of Hadoop. So it is using Hadoop's distributed file system. Hive is using Hadoop's distributed file system to store the data, and we would want to use Spark SQL and especially its data frame API to work on interacting with Hive. Now let's do a spark.sql. Now if you remember, I mentioned that my spark conf directory has already a hive-site file, so it knows where Hive is storing the metadata, and that basically means that your Spark SQL can directly work with Hive, and you can then start using all your Hive queries within Spark, benefit from in-memory processing and the data frame API. So here I can say use testdb. So I basically would want to get into the database, and I'm using this Spark SQL. You see there is an empty data frame created. Now let's say select star from new tbl limit 10, and I could do this and this is basically your data frame. Now you could do a show, and you have started interacting with Hive directly, which creates a data frame which allows you to look at the data, and then you can store it in a variable. You can store this file. Not only this, you could also create a table from Spark SQL. So you could basically do all your Hive related operations from here using your data frame API. So I could be saying similarly, create table new TBL2, and then I could say ID would be integer, name would be string, and then I could just close this. So I'm creating a table and I would like to close this. So let's do that. Now you see somewhere it interacts with Hive Metastore. It has created a new table, and that should be stored in my Hive Metastore and also on your HDFS where Hive related data is getting stored. Now we can even load data into it. So we will say spark.sql. I will use the same statement, load data local in path. I will pick up the file from sample files /kv1.txt. I will say overwrite into table new tbl2, close the bracket, and that should load data into your Hive table. Now let's try querying it. So we'll say spark.sql. I will say select star from new tbl2. I will say order by ID descending, and then I can say limit 10. So I'm running a query which, if would have run in Hive, would have triggered a MapReduce job. Now here this uses a data frame, and you can always do a show which will show you the result. So we are interacting with Hive, we are creating table, we are loading data into it, we are running a query using in-memory processing using data frames, and that does not trigger a MapReduce job. If we had done the same thing using Hive, let me just show you here. So let's get into Hive. Let's start the Hive shell. Let's use our database, and then we can query our table. So I can do use test db, and if I say select star from new tbl2, order by ID descending, limit 10, and just run this, now you will see that this triggers a MapReduce job because Hive uses MapReduce. Now it also mentions on the first line that Hive on MapReduce is deprecated in Hive 2, will not be available in future versions. You can use other execution engines like Spark and Thais, but we are querying the table which we had created using Spark, and now we are using Hive to do it, which obviously takes more time. It triggers a MapReduce job and does the work for you. So this is how you can use your Spark SQL and your data frames to work. Let me just exit this. And there is one more option where you can be interacting with your RDBMS. Now that is, say I have MySQL here and I can log in into this. I can just say show databases. So I have my databases here. I can say use MySQL. I can say show tables, and then I can query one of the tables, like for example help underscore keyword, and then let's do a limit 10. So that shows me some data here. Now it would be good if we could interact with RDBMS and then get the data from here, and for that we will have to do certain things so that we can connect to this and we can work with this RDBMS. So if you look in your user local Spark, now that has a jars directory, and if I look in my jars directory, I have a lot of jar files here, but I would be interested in doing a grep and finding out if I have a MySQL related jar file. So if you see here, we have placed the MySQL jar file. Now where does this jar file come from? So this MySQL jar file, if I look in my home HDU downloads, and then if I look in here, you would see I have a MySQL connector tar file which I have downloaded. Now that particular tar connect or contains your MySQL connector jar file, and this MySQL connector jar file has an inbuilt driver class which allows any particular service to connect with MySQL. So we need the JDBC connector jar file. Only then we can have our Spark connect with MySQL, which we already know is doing because your Spark is able to look at the Hive Metastore, and Hive Metastore is getting stored in MySQL. Now how do we establish a connection from Spark SQL to this MySQL? Like we connected using Spark Hive, you can always use Spark to connect to an external RDBMS, as I mentioned, and you can always search for that. You can just say Spark SQL JDBC data frame and then look into the data frame documentation, which will show you the syntax. But for this, remember, you will have to set up a MySQL instance, you will have to get the driver, and then you can be giving all these options such as URL, DB, query, your driver, and then other options to connect to an RDBMS. You can connect to any particular RDBMS by just basically doing this spark.read.format, connect to an RDBMS, get the data from it, create a data frame, and work on it. For many more examples, you can always look into the data frame documentation. You can always be clicking on this, and then you can see how you can connect with Hive, how you can work with data sets and data frames. You can also look into different data formats which are selected, and you can do much more with data frames. So thank you and keep learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.